then there are nominations for a budget committee chair. And that's the way we've done it the 6 years I've been here. And I know I watched the two before. And that's how Karen Cunningham always got past the gavel from the board chair, because she would historically always do that role. Yeah.
Okay. And I understand because at home in our district, we open the public meeting with the board chair, and then it is seceded over to the budget committee, and then the business is taken care of from there. So it's just a step different than what I'm used to.
At Tillamook Bay Community College, we elect a budget committee chair each year as well.
Yes, and we do too. It's just that it's the budget committee meeting itself is always opened by the budget chair, and I just wanted to make sure I got it straight.
Yeah, and in Seaside, we always had the board chair open, and that was the first step, and then it passes to the election of the budget chair.
Same in Tiger to Walton.
Same at Scappoose.
I wasn't disputing that. I was just saying that that usually is part of our regular board meeting, and so then it's opened as a board meeting and then passed to the budget committee. Then the budget committee passes it back to the board chair once we're finished. So that's just a little different way to do it. All right.
So with that, are we?
Madam Chair, we are live on YouTube.
All right, very good.
We have 7 board members, but only 4 that I can see other budget committee members.
So what is quorum of the budget committee?
10.
Okay, so that's 11.
We scrape by.
All right. With that, I would like to call the Northwest Regional Budget Committee meeting to order. I welcome all budget committee members, the public, and staff. Just a small order of business. Members of the public who wish to make a public comment should have submitted a public comment request to the board secretary prior to the start of the meeting. So with that, can I please have Board Secretary White call the budget committee members with a roll call?
Yes. Jill Zerschmeid.
I'm here.
Clinton Nelson.
That's me.
Jamie Rhodes. Looks like they're absent. Greg Kintz.
Present.
Shannon Emerson. I see Shannon's screen, but I don't hear. I'll come back to that. Sheila Rowley. Looks like she is absent. Alex Flores. Looks like they're not here yet. Jim Hellman. Absent. John Graves. Absent. Jessica O'Donnell. Absent. And now I will run into the board, who are also part of the budget committee. Maureen Wolf.
Present.
Ernest Stevens.
Stevens here.
Paul Jarrell.
Present, thank you.
Christine Riley. Looks like she is absent.
Well, Chris did text me and say that her internet is going in and out, but she was hoping to, so she did text that.
Okay. Doug Doherty.
Present.
Dorian Russell.
Here.
Michelle Graham. Here. Becky Timchuk.
Here.
Miriam Meneses Rios. It looks like she's absent. I'm going to go back. Shannon Emerson, are you with us?
I'm here.
Great, thank you. That's it.
All right, thank you so much. With that, we'll get into, could I please have the Superintendent Goldman and CFO Jordan Ely review the agenda and the role of the Budget Committee and Board?
Absolutely. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Valerie, I just got a text from Jim Hellman who is asking if you could resend the link because he's just spinning out there in space. All right. Well, welcome everybody, and just huge gratitude and appreciation for you spending your time with us to take this important step here in the budget planning process for Northwest Regional ESD. After I review the agenda, we'll do the pledge and the land acknowledgement, which are in the slide deck that I will be running here. We are going to do the elections of the board, the next budget committee chair, as we just discussed. We will get a budget presentation, a little bit from myself and mostly from our CFO, Jordan Ely. We will take public comment if there is any. We'll provide space for deliberation, and then we have a proposed motion this evening. And that should either wrap up the evening with an approved budget, or we will set another date if we can't get that done tonight. Okay. Madam Chair, would you like to lead?
Yes, so we're not going to hear, we're going to do a Pledge of Allegiance?
I know, it's there. We're doing it.
Okay, with that, I will start the Pledge of Allegiance. It's always so awkward on Zoom to know whether to stand or what, but I will start the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag
Flag
of the
of
United
the
States of America and to the
to the
republic
republic
for which it
for which it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty and justice
justice
for all.
all.
There we go. Okay. And with that, our next order of business is to elect a budget committee chair. I will now open the floor for nominations for budget committee chair. Are there Maureen Wolf?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would like to nominate Paul Jarrell as the Budget Committee Chair.
I have a motion from Director Wolf to elect Paul Jarrell for the budget chair.
I would second that motion.
And that was Mr. Nelson, was that you?
Indeed.
All right, thank you. I didn't see your picture there, so I just want to make sure. And it's been properly moved and seconded. Are there any other nominations for budget chair? Again, I am trying to get everybody on a screen. Do I see any other hands up? All right.
I see Mr. Hellman there has his hand up, Madam Chair.
Okay, I cannot see everybody's screen at once, so I apologize. Mr. Superintendent Hellman.
I think, Jim, that was if you have another nomination besides Paul Jarrell. Did you want?
I do not have another nomination. Okay. I was just in support of him.
Okay, there we go. All right. With that, hearing no other nominations, the nominations are now closed. The following people have been nominated for chair of the budget committee. Director Paul Jarrell. We got the moved and seconded. So with that, all those in favor of Paul Jarrell as chairman of the Northwest Regional ESD Budget Committee, you're signify by saying yes, and any opposed signify by saying no. First of all those in favor signify by saying yes. You can also raise your hand if that works for you.
Yes.
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 Are there any nays? With that, the motion passes unanimously. Congratulations, Paul Jarrell. You are now the chair of the Budget Committee, and I very graciously hand the meeting over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Board Chair Tim Chuck. I wish we were in person. I've never held a gavel. I feel like I'm left out a little bit on that. But thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to serve as a Budget Committee Chair. and facilitate this meeting as well. So thank you for your trust in me in doing that. So I appreciate that from the Budget Committee. So my understanding is that we have a budget presentation, and first off, we will hear from Superintendent Dan Goldman to deliver his budget message for us this evening, and then we'll hear from CFO Jordan Ely to discuss for us and present the proposed budget assumptions in the detail. So, Superintendent Goldman.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to back us up just 1 second. I just want to make sure that Jordan has an opportunity to just quickly talk about the roles and responsibilities of the committee, just so we are all clear about what our big task is here ahead of us. So with that, Mr. Ely.
Thank you, Superintendent Goldman. So the roles and responsibilities of the Budget Committee, many of you have done this several times, both here and in districts, so I won't spend too much time on this. The purpose of our meeting tonight is for you all to receive the budget message and the complete budget document. Of course, that was sent out ahead of time, which is allowed by local budget law as well. Also gives you time to review the proposed budget. One of the primary purposes of tonight is to facilitate public input. Of course, that can't be done via email and publishing the document to the webpage. So tonight is an opportunity for public comment. We did not receive any public comments as far as I understand, but we still want to have this meeting and make that opportunity available. And then finally, approve and authorize the budget and the tax rate. And I just want to touch on the tax rate real fast because at our ESD, we do not have any GO bonds that would call for a separate tax or a local option levy that would call for a separate tax. We only have our permanent tax rate. And according to Oregon statutes, that permanent tax rate is, as the name suggests, permanent and not movable. So we still have to follow the same process. Local budget law applies to every local agency in Oregon. So we still have to go through the process of authorizing the tax rate. But we do not have any discretion over that tax rate. It's authorize it or don't. If we don't authorize it, we can't collect local revenues. And I honestly don't know what happens like with the state school fund at that point. So I'm hoping it doesn't come to that. But as we hear some, potentially difficult news as we go through this meeting and we talk about some of the risks to our revenue assumptions and things like that, I can understand the temptation to want to do something with that tax rate. But unfortunately, we do not have that level of discretion with our permanent tax rate. So I just wanted to make clear what's going on with the tax. It is something that we have to do. I know it feels performative and perfunctory, but this is the system that Oregon has us working in.
Okay.
So that'll hand it back to you. Yeah.
Any questions from the committee about those components before we move on? Okay. All righty. So I'm going to run this slide deck and do my best to do that here. All right. So I want to talk about 3 components before passing the baton back to Jordan. Number 1 is I want to talk about a little bit about the ESD and what we're all about and how we construct this budget to reflect our values, our mission, and our commitments. Next, we will talk about budget planning assumptions and the budget risks and challenges that are ahead of us. Right now, we are in a very interesting moment at the end of one biennium, beginning of another, and the beginning phases of a new federal administration. And we'll talk a little bit about federal funds and how those discussions at the federal level are coming to bear on our budget here at home. Just a tiny bit about Northwest Regional ESD, and I know many of you are long timers here at the ESD, but I do think I have not started a budget committee meeting with this information before, and I do think it is informative as we go into a very unclear budget period for the state of Oregon, really, and for us. We often say, we're the largest, which is true in terms of population. ESD in the state, and we often say we're the most diverse. And diverse can mean a lot of things. We are extremely racially diverse in our region. We are also very economically diverse. And then we just have an unbelievable diversity of systems that crash into one another oftentimes or overlay one another oftentimes here in our region. So obviously we're in 4 counties. We've got 20 school districts. 11 of our districts are actually rural, considered rural by the state, and they're small and they need the ESD because they don't have the volume and capacity necessarily for a lot of the things that we can provide and that larger districts do have the capacity to do on their own. We have 186 schools. We have over 100,000 kids. We also have 3 community colleges in our region, and we have 3 CTE or career technical education coordination zones, plus 2 of our districts get those funds directly or have those responsibilities directly, Beaverton and Hillsborough. So we really have 5 CTE zones in our region. We have 2 workforce boards. We have 2 early learning hubs, 2 childcare resource and referral systems, and 3 CCOs in our region. I only put that out there because we are an extremely complex region. And what that means for us is we get to fully lean into the mission of what Oregon has set out for ESDs. And so I'm very I often refer back to the statute about what we are supposed to be doing because people want a lot from an ESD, and oftentimes it's interesting to know what we're supposed to be doing with ourselves. I want to point out here at the beginning of our state statutes around what ESDs are and the mission and purpose of ESDs is that we are equity-based organizations, and our mission is to ensure that kids from all corners of our region have an equitable and excellent education for every student, regardless of their zip code, their disability status, their racial identities, their gender and sexual identities, et cetera, their migrant status. It is all over the state statute about how ESDs are the gap fillers. And so we have a vision here at the ESD, and it's our why. It's our North Star about what it is that we're supposed to be doing for our districts and for our partners here in this northwest corner of the state. And that's that every student is educated, equipped, and inspired to achieve their full potential and enrich their communities. And I say all this to you because when you put it all together, this is what we're all about. We are gap fillers, and we are in the spaces that are often the most difficult spaces in communities. They are messy. There are more complex and complicated spaces. We're asked to often come in and solve problems that single agencies can't necessarily solve on their own. And I believe that when you really take a look through our budget and where our resources are allocated, our budget reflects these values, to the utmost degree. We are primarily, our huge parts of our budget are around students with disabilities and ensuring that kids with the most complex needs get what they need. In our early learning settings, which in Oregon, unfortunately, we don't have a well-articulated early learning system, and oftentimes we are the early learning system in spaces, and that's and oftentimes in spaces that really need a lot more than what is available for young families. We do migrant programming. We help districts do community engagement, translation services, and an array, obviously, we have over 100, I think it's about 130 different grants and special revenue funds. And they are squarely about closing gaps, opportunity and outcome gaps for students furthest from opportunity. So here were our budget planning assumptions as of, budgets don't come together in a week. We've been working on this really since, headlong since January. We really, it is a full year process, but really headlong since January, right before the legislative session opened. We had a governor's recommended budget And that budget formed the basis of our projections and the way that we were trying to make ends meet within our budget. And here are some of those assumptions. So the first is the state school fund is funded at 11.36 billion. And we're going to talk about some of the moving parts here in a moment. Property tax collection rate of 97%, stable district service purchases. So a lot of what we do is purchase service from districts who need more support. In the governor's budget, there was a recognition of a hope for and a projection of stable federal grant funding. On the spending side or our expenditure side, step increases for all of our eligible staff. So those are seniority increases, modest PERS rate increases, health insurance increases of 5%, and general supply inflation of 3%. So as we began our budget planning process, these were the components and the variables we were playing with. Of course, for those of you who've been on the budget committee for a while, you know I try to start with some kind of inspirational quote from an amazing leader who talks about budgets and values, and like Joe Biden, show me your budget and I'll tell you your values, right? Well, this year I decided to take another stab at greatness here with Mike Tyson, and that is everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And I think we are in that kind of heavyweight battle right now with trying to understand and make sense of all the moving parts and the uncertainty that we are in financially. So since printing our budget, so a lot has changed since the governor's budget. We've had a full throttle legislative session. We've had all kinds of federal directives and changes in our federal education system and the health services side of the House. I'm not going to litigate those things now, but it has been busy. And I think uncertain is the word that I would probably use the most to describe its impact on education agencies, probably nationally. But even then, we've been constructing our budget in those times. Since printing our budget, we have had a May economic forecast, so the June forecast for the state of Oregon. And in that, we have some very sobering news in that economic forecast. The legislature has approximately $800 million less than the forecast just before it, which we really did use to construct our budget. And the legislature really only has about $400 million in discretionary ability left for solving a million, problems in the state and to try to fill in as many gaps as we have across not just education, but every sector, from transportation to human services, et cetera, public safety, et cetera. And 400 of that, about 400 million of that, approximately 100 million that they had left has already been appropriated. And so there have already been decisions made that had budget tags in the legislature. So we're at a very narrow window for making improvements into our budget picture right now. We do not expect the legislature to finalize appropriations until after our board, hopefully after this budget committee work, our board has an opportunity to adopt the budget. The legislature will still be making final decisions. They have a target of June 18th, and our board is set to approve the budget earlier than that. Our districts around us are also experiencing moderate to severe reduction scenarios. And for us who rely heavily on our district's ability to purchase services from the ESD, we are seeing a downtick in the amount of purchasing from districts because they're in financial distress. And then lastly, we have IDEA is the special federal special education funding for states, and it has remember I said the governor's budget assumed flat funding or stable funding. Now it is turned to flat funding for next year, and it is unknown what is going to occur in 26, 27. The forecast and the prognostications are that we will have reductions in federal spending for social service, education, and those types of programs. And so you're seeing those conversations happen at the federal level. Many of our programs rely very heavily on federal funds. As I mentioned before, huge portions of our budget are dedicated to special education funding. So ESDs and our ESDs specifically will have a much larger burden to bear if federal funds do not come in higher, and we do not expect them to come in higher right now. And we just received, since printing the budget, we received estimates for some of our largest programs in our budget here, which are EIECSE, Early Childhood Special Education, and Regional Inclusive Services, which is our state contract to serve kids with high intensity, low incidence disabilities out in school district communities. So these are highly specialized staff, occupational therapists, speech pathologists, etc. And our estimates are below the current service level set by the governor's office. And so we have a very short window to try to bring this budget to bear as it is printed with the legislature, that is, short window with the legislature. And so here's what I'd like to leave us with before I hand it over to Jordan. The budget that you have before us is a best case scenario budget. And there is significant probability that our revenue projections are overly optimistic. The reason why we still want you and are asking you to approve this budget at that optimistic scenario is because we intend to fight like the Dickens through the legislative session to improve the outlook, and we will need permission to spend any revenues that come in, and if we don't have that authority from the budget committee or from the board in this budget, we will not be able to then turnkey those resources into programs for kids without coming back. So this budget is built to allow us to fully utilize any funds that we receive as we go through the rest of this legislative session. And with that, I will turn it over to Jordan for the rest.
Thank you. So I wanted to just start with an overview of our operating revenue mix. And so what these numbers represent in this little pyramid are, if I take away all of the interfund transfers that we do, we bring revenue into our general fund, for example, through the state school fund process, 90% of what we get in the state school fund is dedicated to our districts by law. We have to flow it through to them. And so those funds get then transferred into a trust and agency account, which is our 700 funds. And then from there, our districts decide what to do with those funds. Sometimes they take them in as cash in lieu of service. Sometimes they purchase back into services. And so it gets to a place because of governmental accounting where we are counting the same dollar twice and sometimes 3 times. And so I wanted to give us a clear view of when we strip away beginning fund balances, transfers internally, all of those kinds of things, how do we actually operate our agency? And so about 83% of what we do here is grants or contracts in our special revenue fund. So these are, when I talk about these are contracts for services like our regional inclusive services provide speech language pathology services. If a district wants to purchase extra speech language pathology services, that goes into the same, it gets merged in with the grant funds so that we can maximize the service that we can provide to districts. And so we have grant and contract programs that have specific uses. That's about 83% of the revenues that we use to operate our agency. And then about 10% is our general fund. That is the 10% that gets left over from the state school fund process, plus revenues that we pull from grants on indirect, utilizing our indirect rate so that we can provide administration for those grants. So that's about 10% of our operating revenues. And then our enterprise fund is the final 7% of what we use to operate the agency. And so that is primarily the work that our technology department does with the Cascade Technology Alliance. And so this is, we're hosting software for districts. We provide support desk services, things like that in the tech department. The fiscal department does do some contract business management services for districts. And our HR department does things like investigation services, Title IX coordination, things like that. And so that is how we are operating. That is the revenue mix that we are using to operate our agency. So over the last few years, I'm sure you all in your various roles have heard all about the ESSER cliff. And so the only thing that I wanted to show here is that we do see staffing declining over time in our agency. But when you hear about a cliff, you imagine a curve that looks a lot different than this, I hope. The ESD has tried to very strategically utilize those ESSER resources and any other one-time resources like the Governor's Emergency Relief Fund, so that as those funds tapered away, we weren't falling off a cliff with our staffing. And really, when you look at the context of what's happened with EIECSE over the last couple of years, along with ESSER, it has taken a significant amount of resource management to get us to a place where our line is this stable and flat, even though it is declining. Our overall resources, adjusted for inflation and all of those kinds of things, are also declining. So this is how we've managed the staffing portion. Just like a school district, over 85% of our resources are used for staffing. So when we talk about resources diminishing over time, of course, the primary lever we have to pull is in staffing. So this chart is an interesting chart. It was included in the executive summary of the budget document, but I wanted to take a minute to talk about it because of what I did with it. So often when we see a line graph, what we're comparing is year over year. So how much did we grow from 2019-20 to 2020-21, from 2021 to 2022, and so on. What this chart is plotting is actually what each of those years is relative to 2019-20. The reason for that is because when we budgeted for 2019-20, that is the last time that we budgeted without a pandemic and without ESSER funds involved. And so as our resources have grown over time, you can see our overall revenue for the 25-26 budget is expected to be about 49% higher than our revenue in 2019-20 was. And then with our staffing, what we've done with that is we've seen reductions in classified, a very minor increase in administration. To put some context around what 4.47% is, that's 2.6 FTE in administration for a 60% growth in licensed. And so we as an agency, we have very much tried to prioritize and hold almost sacrosanct the direct services that students are receiving. We have done a lot of work as an admin team to try to get as efficient as we possibly can in administration of the agency. But of course, when we add hundreds of employees, those employees all have to be evaluated and supervised and all those kinds of things. So there has been a slight increase in administration from 2019-20 to now. But the vast majority of our new resources have been prioritized to direct service for kids.
Oops.
And so today, this is what our staffing mix looks like. 8% of our staff are administrators, 39% of our staff are classified, and 53% of our staff are licensed. Okay, so I actually sit on a budget committee myself for my kid's school district. And every time I sit in those meetings, I try to think, what do I want to hear? And I'm not saying that I'm going to get this exactly right because I recognize that I have a different lens on it. I'm very comfortable reading the budget document. But I think most of you are comfortable reading the budget document as well. And so I wanted to spend some time. What I always think when I'm in a budget committee meeting on your side of the table is, what are you doing with this money? And so I want to spend a little bit of time talking about 4 of our main programs, regional inclusive services, SEL schools, and EIECSE. All of these are directly related to serving students with varying disabilities from birth all the way to age 21. And then we have workforce development. It's not as significant of a program, but it is a new program. So I wanted to talk about that as well. Regional inclusive services, these are how we provide supports for students with low incidence disabilities. So blind and visually impaired students, deaf and hard of hearing students, students with orthopedic impairments and different things like that. Regional inclusive services comes alongside our school districts and makes sure that kids have what they need to learn, but also that educators know how to serve students who have these low incidence disabilities. Our SEL schools are social emotional learning programs. So these are programs for students who may have some behavioral or mental health challenges, where being in their neighborhood classroom may not be the best place for them to receive service. And so we bring them into an SEL school and we provide specialized behavioral and psychological supports that allow the student to learn how to interact, both learn, but also learn how to interact, and in some cases, go back to their home school. And then EIECSE is our early intervention and early childhood special education. These are for children birth to age 5. This is the first opportunity that the public education system has to help a student who has specialized needs. And so that's one of our main programs. After I touch on workforce development, I'm going to spend some time talking about EIECSE because it's our largest individual program, but it also has some funding dynamics that kind of inform the rest of our budget. So workforce development is a new program. This has been requested by our districts. And so this will be funded by some seed funding from the agency, and then through an annual transfer as part of our core services to our districts. And as the slide says, this is for bridging education to employment. This is something that our business community has asked for. It's something that our districts have asked for. And the ESD is stepping up in anticipation of our state recognizing the need for investment in this area. Okay, so EIECSE. This is a really interesting puzzle, and the last couple of years have given me an opportunity to learn a whole bunch of new things about how funding works in Oregon, thanks to this specific program. So when we were developing the budget, we made an assumption about what proportion of the kids receiving services would be getting those services from our agency. And we also made an assumption about how much overall money would be available in the state's budget. So we thought we would have about 17.9% of the students receiving services. And we thought that the budget would be $409 million. We had heard that number floated around as a current service level number that had been calculated by a committee at the state. So we were reasonably confident that that is the number that we would get. The proportion that we get funded on is based on what is called the April rolling average. And so the way this program works is the enrollment fluctuates pretty widely from the beginning of the year to the end of the service year. And so they use this April rolling average to kind of just get an idea of how the proportion should work. And so our April rolling average this year was 17.6%. Now, 0.3 percentage points probably doesn't sound like a lot, but when we're talking about $400 million, that's over $1 million difference. So right off the bat, we knew that we were gonna have some adjustments to make because we didn't have as big of a proportion. And then we received our first estimate for this program, and the math didn't really work out. So I took the 409 million, I multiplied it times 0.176, and then times 0.49, because generally these grants are split 49% in the first year, 51% in the second year. And the number didn't come out right. And so that launched an investigation process, I guess you could say, where we spent a lot of time with the state trying to understand why the math wasn't mathing, as the kids like to say, or at least my kids like to say. And what we found out is that there's this process that the state goes through, and I can't blame them. It's exactly what I'm asking this committee to do, which is give me permission to spend up to my most optimistic revenue assumption. And that is what was included in the governor's recommended budget. So when we see 409 million, which actually turned out to be 408.6 million, part of what that number is what's called limitation. So we call it appropriations at the local level. It's called limitation at the state level. And so what that means is that the state, the Department of Education can spend up to a certain amount, assuming that amount comes in. What we've learned is that, the governor's budget was prepared last November. And then in March, we got the continuing resolution at the federal government that authorized IDEA spending for our 25-26 fiscal year. And it was flat funded. That flat funding was $10 million less for the biennium than what was included in that limitation. And so right off the bat, now we're knocked down to $398 million. And that's assuming that we're flat funded for the whole biennium. As Dan said earlier, what we've heard from every advocate who works at the federal level is that we should expect up to a 20% reduction in IDEA for the second year, for 2026-27. It would be irresponsible of us to build the program without taking that into consideration. And so we now believe that what we should expect is 17.6% of $395 million for the biennium, 49% of that in the first year, 51% in the second year. These numbers are still moving today. We've flagged this issue for legislators. A couple of legislators that our advocates have spoken to were surprised when they see a $409 million governor's budget. They thought that meant $409 million was actually going to this program. So we do have people who are navigating the process in Salem, trying to get a higher level of state support for this program now that we know that we have a lower level of federal support. But as Dan talked about, we have a really difficult economic situation in our state, and they have to deal with potholes on I-5 and rehabilitation programs in downtown Portland, and like all these different, like our state government does far more than just public education. So how this is all going to shake out, we don't really know. But we have as an agency begun planning for 17.6% of 395 million. We are still asking that you approve the higher revenue amount for spending so that if that funding comes in, we can utilize it. But also understand that approving this budget, of course, as you all know, doesn't mean that we can actually spend that money. It's dependent on what actually comes through. So of course, we'll be looking for those grant agreements to come through in late June, early July. That will tell us exactly where our funding is coming in on this program. But this last point down at the bottom of the slide is what's really important. What makes EIECSE so difficult is that it is a mono-sourced program, meaning that it's a state contract. We don't charge districts for these services. We don't really have a mechanism in which we could charge districts for these services. There's not other grants we can pursue to backfill it for the operations. There's funding that we can pursue for things like capital projects, but there's no funding that we can pursue to operate the program aside from this state contract. So we really are just beholden to whatever the state determines they are able to fund this program at. So here's the takeaway. We originally thought 17.9% of 409 million. That gives us a biennial total of $73.1 million. 17.6% of 395 million puts us at $69.6 million. So when I talk about how we are starting to prepare plans for how to, I don't want to say it's not right sized. Like the 73.1 is not even right sized for this program. There's an adequate service level that calculation that's even higher, and that's where this program should be. These are the most vulnerable children in the public education system. But be that as it may, we have a $3.5 million delta from what was calculated as current service level to what we believe could be our reality for the program. So as we are preparing internally, that is the magnitude of change that the board and the budget committee need to be prepared to see if this comes in at the levels that are currently being talked about at the state level. Okay, so as Dan said, we utilize roughly 130 grants plus contracts with districts both in our region and districts outside of our region to provide a whole host of services. And in this budget, what we have done is we have prepared an appropriations amount that allows us to fully utilize all of those resources. It's very unlikely that our overall resource mix is going to result in the total revenue that's listed in this budget. But because we don't know which of those programs are going to be prioritized and exactly which programs the districts are going to purchase and all of those kinds of things, we need the appropriations for each individual program to be sufficient, so that in the best case scenario, all of them get funded at current service level. We are able to deliver all of those services. So the next steps in the budget process are to receive public comment. As I said, we did not receive any requests for public comment, so that'll probably be a pretty quick agenda item. And then we have time for the committee to deliberate, ask questions of staff. Dan and I, of course, will be here to answer any questions that you have. If the committee, I don't want to say if the committee feels comfortable. I don't think anything about this budget process feels comfortable for any of us. But if you feel that this is a reasonable and good faith estimate of the overall resources available to each fund, then we can approve the budget at this meeting. Or if you feel that we need more time to review and discuss things like that, then we can schedule a second meeting. And then if the budget is approved, then it moves to the board budget hearing on June 11th, which will provide another opportunity for public comments and another round of questions from the board if needed. And then the board can vote to adopt. So that is what the overarching budget process looks like from here. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Jarrell for facilitating the deliberation part.
Thank you. I certainly want to just indicate the appreciation I have for the care it takes in putting together a budget, especially under these uncertain times. So thank you, Superintendent Goldman, for your presentation of sort of the landscape that the budget was developed within and the challenges with that. And thank you, CFO Ely, for presenting a complex budget in a way that's a little bit attainable for some of us that aren't so budget minded. So I appreciate that. So thank you both for that. So just to confirm, this would be the time when we would invite members of the public for public comment. Members of the public do have to submit requests for public comment prior to the start of the meeting. And just to confirm, Board Secretary White, it's my understanding that we have not received any requests for public comment. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, good. Well, having no public comment, then we'll just sort of move right along into our time for deliberations and questions regarding this budget that was just presented to us. So I'll open the floor to the Budget Committee. Do you have any questions or comments that you might have that CFO Ely or Superintendent Goldman might be able to address for you? Now's the time to ask those. And Board Secretary White, if you could help me monitor the Zoom room here, I would appreciate that. I see a question from Board Chair Temchuk.
Thank you. My first question is, Jordan, I know this is a different way to propose a budget. Have you in your previous any other places, how often have you offered this kind of budgeting process?
You mean with an optimistic revenue forecast?
Correct.
Yeah. Well, what's really interesting is I would venture a guess, and I don't mean to put any of your district CFOs on the spot or the hot seat with this. I would venture a guess that every budget proposal you all have viewed does a very similar thing with the special revenue fund specifically. And I will say in my former districts, we always, quote unquote, over appropriated the special revenue fund because you might get new grants in that you're not expecting and different things like that. What's different here, and that's why I wanted to start with the revenue mix, so I really appreciate this question, is our special revenue fund is 83% of our revenue mix. Special revenue fund in most of your districts is probably 20 to 30%. at most. And that's because we've seen a lot more grants coming through at the state level. So quote unquote over appropriating, I don't think that's the right word. It's just the one that all of us business officials use when we're talking about this at conferences and stuff. But like doing an optimistic revenue assumption for the special revenue fund is a very common practice. I won't say best practice, but certainly it's a common practice. The enterprise fund and the general fund in this budget are not over appropriated or optimistically appropriated. The primary places where we see those optimistic revenue projections are EIECSE, Regional Inclusive Services, and SEL schools. Those are the primary places where we have significant risk to our revenue. At a much smaller scale, we do have revenue risk to much smaller grants, but these are grants that are only $100,000 to $200,000 to begin with. And so if you lose 5 to 10% on a grant like that, you're losing, $5,000 to $20,000, not millions of dollars like with the IECSE.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up, if I may, Chair.
Certainly.
So when you do budgeting this way, because again, we can, it's not an exact science. We do the best that we can, and some additional money comes in that we don't expect, and money that we can expect maybe doesn't come through. When we do it this way, especially on these big items that the ESD counts on so much, at what point do you, as the CFO, know how far in advance do you know if that money isn't going to come through, how that is going to how we do business in the ESD? How far along do we make a decision and get ahead of this when we don't know that it may or may not come to fruition?
Well, what I can tell you is that for these larger programs, we've already begun changing our hiring decisions for this spring. So this is the time of year when school districts are hiring. It's when labor is most commonly available. So in an ideal scenario, we would be fully staffing up. If we were very confident that these are the levels we would get next year, we would be staffing up. We would probably have already begun staffing up around spring break and staffing up through the whole spring, so that when we start the next fiscal year, we are fully staffed in every one of these programs. We've already had to deviate away from that process. We don't want to bring people on board and then have to make difficult decisions after they've made life choices and come to work with us. So as far as the timing, as soon as we get information like the estimate that we got 2 weeks ago, we immediately have to start dealing with that information. The flip side to that coin is that if we overreact, because there is an entire appropriations process, and we do have legislators who are very much in our corner and very much believe in these programs, we don't want to overcorrect, have the money come in, and not be able to deliver services. So we are delicately threading a needle right now. We plan with EIECSE as an example to have full service available in July, because there is an influx of service that happens over the summer with EIECSE. And then when that kind of natural progression is over, then we can start to make some different decisions about how we provide service in those programs. But we expect to get grant agreements throughout the month of June. And the process that we follow internally, or that we'll be using at least this year internally, is when those grant agreements come in, we will do what I'm calling a revenue reconciliation, where we take what we put in the budget as far as revenue, we identify the delta to what our actual is, and then we start making decisions about what the program service model will look like in these different programs. So that will be happening through June and July.
Just real quick here. Thank you. And Jordan just kind of hit the nail on the head here on the notion of overreaction. We're just, every single sector of the economy, public, private, is in a high degree of uncertainty right now on the revenue mix, on their revenue mix. And one thing that we have committed to here, because the federal appropriations, we do have our federal appropriations through this period of time right now. And then in October, we're going to learn a lot more about what's really going to come down from the federal government. And our philosophy, my philosophy, our team's philosophy right now is we are not going to, and I call this, I say it a certain way. I say we're not going to obey in advance. We are not going to cut critical services to kids in advance of what might occur at the federal level. We're not Pollyannic about it. We understand what is happening, but we are not going to shut services down for kids because of executive orders. We're just not going to do that. And so that's kind of our philosophy. And of course, we will hopefully get it right, but we will most likely not nail this thing. And we'll have to make some adjustments after the federal appropriations process. But that's been our general philosophy.
Thank you both for that. I have a question in the chat, but before I get to that, committee member Kent's.
Yes, in Superintendent Dan, your in your budget message there, you had two percentages that I was unsure about. You said that there would be a 7% increase in state school fund, 4% increase in contract revenue. Is that contract revenue? Is that the enterprise fund? Is that where that goes?
I'll let the numbers guy do that one, but yeah.
Yeah, so that is both the enterprise fund and the special revenue fund. Some of our contracts with our districts within our region, that revenue goes into our special revenue fund because we combine it with grant monies to try to leverage those as best we can. And so that reference to a 4% increase, we increased our rates by 4%. And so if everybody purchased exactly the same thing next year as they did this year, we would see a 4% increase. Since writing the budget, we've gone through the LSP selection process and we've seen a downward trend in the services that districts are selecting as they try to make some difficult decisions about how to balance their own budgets. So I don't think that we will realize a 4% increase in revenue. But what that number was referring to is if everything held station, we've increased our rates by 4%, which would cause a 4% increase.
And Greg, the 7% is the state school fund at 11.36. The first year of the state school fund projection from the year we're standing in right now is about a 7% increase.
Okay. That's what I thought, but I wanted to make sure. And in the trust and agency funds, it shows a $3 million increase. Is that that is money that's going out to the districts?
Yeah. Yeah, the trust and agency funds belong to the districts and we hold them at custodial capacity here.
Yeah. So basically the state school fund comes in, it's coming in higher. We transfer that into that agency account so that the districts can access that.
Well, thank you very much. And I just wanted to say that I especially appreciate the list of actions that you put in your budget message that show us what the state has done over the years that has impacted us in such a great way. And that is definitely something that I'm going to share with our district and explain it to people and say, look, this is what we've had to put up with for a very long time. And this is what we have to work under when you think we're not using the money wisely. What money? The money hasn't been coming to us, and here's some reasons why. And I really appreciate that list.
Thank you. Thank you, Committee Member Kent. I appreciated that list too. It was very helpful. I'm going to read a question from the chat, and then Maureen will go to you in a second, okay? So from Jim Hellman, are there plans to expand or reduce staff or services in the upcoming year with the currently proposed budget?
And hey, Chairman Jarrell,
Jim.
I know that Superintendent Goldman and Jordan actually answered that kind of within the last two answers to questions. So I've got my question answers. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Committee Member Hellman. Committee Member Wolf.
So comment and a question. First, thank you, Chair Durrell. So Jordan and Dan, I mean, again, I just want to compliment the slides. I think the transfers, just pulling it all out and showing a pyramid here is just real dollars and how they serve, I think was a very helpful visual. I think, again, to ditto Greg's comment and just thinking about all the hard work around the Student Success Act and to really see how those dollars are landing now. Just some great representation of funding. So my wondering is, I completely support trying to stay aggressive, be optimistic, but be thoughtful and, reserved in staffing. Clearly, you are communicating tonight. You put it in writing. It's going to be for all who have joined us to share this, but what are those direct communications to staff? So it's not really a budget question, but how are we handling this with our team?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Maureen. We have an action alert that is actually drafted, and we are going to send it hopefully this evening and maybe tomorrow morning. We are engaged with our associations right now and evaluating whether that would be a co-communication or not, and that's why we have not hit send on it yet. It is really focused on regional inclusive services and EIECSE. And we have, so those two, and it's really around, here's what we thought we were getting because that was in the governor's budget. Here's the delta, the stuff that Jordan just ran us through, and what we can do about it, because time is of the essence here, with some template communications and those types of things. So we are geared up to communicate really about those two programs because they have the most volatility and risk in our budget. And we have a lot of people there. There are other challenges in our budget, and this is one of those, from spending my whole career in school districts to now being at the ESD in the school district. Like Jordan said, you know, the special revenue is kind of secondary. You overinflate it, and then you work on getting grants, and you try to have some appropriation level. And you're really worried about that state school fund number because it really drives everything. And that's a really easy thing to communicate about. I thought it was challenging at the time, but now it's pretty easy, because we have 130 different revenue streams that actually make up the lion's share of our staffing. It's not the state school fund. And so our messages are much more difficult, I think, to send. They require more scalpels and less cleavers. And so we're focusing on these two programs right now. But we have some, and I wrote them in my budget message. You'll see some other bullets where we have some real concerns. We have the Student Success Act, as you mentioned. There's a proposed $7.5 million reduction statewide for us. That's over $1 million for the biennium. And we have real people doing awesome work in support of districts like Jim's, on integrated guidance, community engagement, data use, etc. And those are real concerns for us. But we just can't, it's like too much, it's almost too much. So we're going to focus real hard on these two large grants right now. And the other message that we've tried to send to staff is one of not panic. And like I said, we're not going to obey in advance and clear the decks. We're going to have to wait and see a little bit more on this one.
Thank you, Superintendent Goldman. I appreciate your attention and care around messaging of this because these aren't, for the most part, paper clips we're talking about. These are people we're talking about, and I know that you all don't take these decisions lightly, and not only the employees that are impacted by decisions that are somewhat made for us, right, and out of our control, but also recognizing the impact that has on the communities that we serve. So again, I appreciate the district's attention to both of those. I do have a question from the chat. I'll address to you and Jordan. This is from committee member Emerson. The amounts for travel and conferences in this current budget is much higher for the upcoming year. Any ideas about the purpose of that increase or the cause of that increase?
Yeah, I'll start with travel first, and then I'll loop back to conferences. So with travel, the vast majority of that is actually for our travel within the region. And so I think many of you probably know this. I'm just going to call out my own self and my predecessors and saying that we have had a lot of turnover in the business office at this agency. And there are line items and budgets that sometimes don't keep up. And with travel, that is primarily what's going on here. When we look back at the actuals, I'm just bringing the budget up so that we start with a better plan for what we need to spend so that we can provide service to our districts. So this is our staff going out to districts, providing different services. That is what primarily the travel is. And so the other type of travel is out of district travel, which would be like I go to a conference in Bend every year for school business officials. And so whenever we leave the 4-county region, we call that out of district travel. So we have in-district travel, out of district travel. I've really just tried to align the budget, inflate for the new federal reimbursement rates and all that kind of stuff, but really just bring the budget in line to what we have experienced is the need we have for getting our staff out into districts. For conferences, I don't recall too many specific line items where we've increased for conferences. The only one that comes to my mind is we have heard from both the National School Boards Association and AESA, which is the Association of Education Service Agencies, that they're both trying to build up muscle around ESD board governance. And so we wanted to make sure that we had resources available. For agencies our size, it is very customary and I think appropriate for board members to go to those conferences, engage in discussions around governance together and different things like that, learn best practices about managing their districts. An agency like ours, as you've seen, as we've been talking tonight, is extraordinarily complex. And so we wanted to make sure that we had the resources earmarked. All of that is in the general fund. This is where communicating the ESD budget has been extremely difficult, not difficult, I don't want to say that, but complex, in that we all you have to hold it in partitions in a way. Our general fund is expected to increase by 7%, whereas we're expecting staffing cost increases of around 5.5%, general inflation of around 3 to 4%, except for in key areas like insurance and utilities. And so our general fund is quite healthy, and it's not an over-optimistic revenue projection. That is based on the 11.36 billion appropriation from the governor. So which we think is very likely. What we've heard from all of our advocates at the state, we think is likely. So our general fund is in a very healthy place. All of the other things that we were talking about, like EI, ECSE, and RISE and all those, they have discrete and distinct revenue sources that have to be spent only on those programs. And so I just want to make sure that I'm clear that when we're talking about travel and conferences, for the most part, we're talking about the general fund. We have very little budgeted for other than just direct service provision to kids within our special revenue fund for those purposes.
Thank you.
And Paul, if I can speak a little bit to that as a superintendent, there's been an increase in requests for ESD staff to really be in districts providing real-time support and professional development. And just that practice alone itself has increased the academic achievement of students. So we're seeing a huge positive, I think, outcome to that.
Well, that's great. Thank you for that comment. Much appreciated. Any additional comments? Committee member, forgive me if I mispronounce this, Dershmead?
Yeah.
Great.
So wearing my school board member hat at the same time, budget committee member for the ESD hat, can you give us some idea of what the overall reduction in pass-through to districts and credits for district is going to be looking like for next year based on the optimistic budget and also maybe the reality budget?
This is the great news about our general fund being in a healthy place, is that we actually expect an increase in funds that are available to districts. And so our I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I want to say something like $3 million additional dollars will be available to our districts to be flowed through to our districts. So in that general fund, 90% of our state school fund just gets flowed through to the district's trust and agency accounts.
And I'll just add one little piece there, Jill, if it's okay. So yeah, the state school fund going up by nature, our flow through dollars go up. What we're experiencing is that districts have less capacity to spend those resources back at the ESD. And so that's the mix for us on our staffing and our operations side, but actually on the revenue side, it's going to be a net increase for districts.
Okay. Yeah, I was just confused because you're talking about you're going to be reducing staffing. Does that mean that less resources are available? So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Appreciate the question. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Movie reviews? Board Member Wolf.
I move to approve the Northwest Regional Education Service District budget as presented for the 2025-26 as follows, or as, yes. So do I have to read that or does that count?
You
I've
gotta
seen
put
it
it-
both ways, Maureen. I think it's legal either way.
I think our history is you got to read it, Maureen.
Well, I should have let Chris then read it. Okay. I again move to approve the budget as presented for the general fund, 71,469,543. Special revenue fund, 119,738,628. Debt service fund, 1,319,755. Capital projects fund, 542,586. Enterprise Fund, 12,277,513. Trust and Agency Fund, 57,843,549, for a total appropriated funds of 264,191,573, and an unappropriated fund balance of $4 million.
I second.
Thank you, Director Wolf. A second. It's a second by Committee Member Zerschmied. Okay, very good. So since we have a motion and a second, any further discussion before we call a vote? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of approval of the 25-26 budget as read into record, please indicate by saying aye or raising your right hand or a hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passed. Sounds like we have an approved budget. Thank you all for that. Now having a budget, we also have to approve, I believe, the tax rates. Is that correct?
Here you go. Yes, it is.
Correct.
Do we
Mr. Chair,
have?
I'd like to move to approve the tax rate of $0.1538 per $1,000 of assessed value to be assessed in support of the general fund.
Thank you, Committee Member Kent. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Director Riley, for the second. We have a motion and a second. Any further comment regarding the proposed tax rate? Hearing none, we will call a vote. All those in favor of the tax rate is read into record, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Congratulations. We have a approved budget and tax rate for 25-26. Well done. I certainly would like to thank not only CFO Ely and Superintendent Goldman. I know how much effort goes into this by any number of folks at the ESD in preparing proposed budget. So very admirable. And I also agree with Greg Kentz, who indicated a great presentation. And indeed, Northwest Regional ESD is the gold standard of ESDs in Oregon. There was never a doubt about that. We certainly appreciate that, and that is due to the leadership that's been demonstrated here. So I thank you all for that as well. I also know that Maybe some of us on this call had something else to do this evening, but it was not as important as what you just did. So thank you for taking care and providing some of your time to serve on the committee. It is being a board member on this ESD. It is incredibly meaningful work that they do, and you all are a part of that. And I thank you all tremendously for the time that you've dedicated to this. With that said, sounds to me like you have an approved budget for 25-26, and I suppose we will see it at our next Northwest Regional ESD board meeting. So with that said, I would like to again thank everybody, but adjourn this meeting at 7:15 p.m. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a good
Chair.
evening.
And thank you, Tara Van Dyke, for all your work.
Yes.
You all take care.
Bye-bye.
Good job, Jordan. Good job.
Good job, Jordan.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate that.
Very optimistic.
Yeah. Stuart, I think we can stop recording now, right?
Yep.
Okay. I'm gonna hit the stop button.
So everybody, I hope you get to enjoy the long weekend.
You as
Yeah,
well.
you too.
Yeah.
I'm headed
It's
down to
gonna-
Grants Pass, Becky.
Oh, there you go. Give my
I'll say hi to
regards.
my grandma Grace for you.
Oh, please. See if she remembers me.
She does. I asked her about it after we talked at that one board meeting.
What?
She absolutely, her face lit up when I mentioned your name.